obsession is similar to addiction. So like if you play a game of chess and you lose, well, I got to play at least one more now to win. And if you win, well, I'm just going to keep playing until I lose. So it becomes like an addiction. And same thing with comedy. Like if you go up and you don't perform well, I got to go back tomorrow and prove that I'm better than I was tonight. And when you do well, it feels so good. It's so much dopamine. Oh, I got to do this again tomorrow night. And well, it's not what they should be obsessed about, but how to cultivate an obsession, how to find what you're obsessed about. So, and there's no direct answer. You just have to expose yourself to a lot of things. Like go to the bookstore, and is there any section where you would be willing to read every single book in that section? That might indicate you're obsessed with that area. And then you have to brainstorm, what can I do to further this obsession? Well, obviously AI. AI is just unbelievable. I mean, we're doing this at 11 a.m. I've probably used Grok and actually 19.ai, hundreds of times today so far. It's replaced Google search for me. It's replaced almost, I used beautiful.ai to create a PowerPoint presentation. I don't even have Microsoft PowerPoint, and you can use all these AI tools to create beautiful PowerPoint presentations. So AI is nothing is stopping that. I talked to the CEO of freelance.org or freelance.com. It's the biggest freelancing site in the world. He said since AI, we've gone from 6 million freelancers signed up to the site to 60 million. Because now, let's say me, I've never been a graphic designer in my life, but let's say a record label advertises or posts on freelance.com, hey, I need a logo designer for my new album. Okay, well, now I can use sophisticated AI programs to make a AI logo. In fact, I can make 20 logos in a day. I didn't know how to use Photoshop, but now I could use Midjourney, and I could use 19.ai, Subnet 19 on Bittensor to edit my photos very quickly. It's much faster than Midjourney. So there's so many more opportunities now for solopreneurs, freelancers to use AI to do all the things I used to hire people to do.
Welcome to the Ventura Labs podcast. Today, we are joined by James Altucher, entrepreneur, investor, author, and lifelong experimenter. From building early internet companies to writing about crypto, AI, and finance, James has always been ahead of the curve. In this conversation, we dive into his work with Bittensor, why he launched TAO Synergies as a treasury company, and how his philosophy on obsession and reinvention shapes the way he sees decentralized AI transforming the future. Now, back to James with the 59th Ventura Labs podcast.
All right, James. I don't even know if I can give you a proper introduction, so I'm just going to leave it at that. How are you doing today, man?
Well, first, thank you so much for inviting me on the podcast. I've been watching the podcast. I was wondering if you would ask me to come on, so I'm really grateful.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to get you here. And the more research I did on you before the podcast, I became even more excited to get you here. So,
well, I hope you didn't read too much hate articles about me. I hope it was more good than bad.
Yeah, I didn't even know there was hate articles, so I talked to you. But okay, let's start with, I met you because of Bittensor. So let's start with Bittensor first before we get into all the other aspects of your life and your history. So my first question is, what is Bittensor?
First off, I want to say that's a good question, because if you ask me what's Ethereum, there's like an easy one-line answer. If you ask me what's Solana, what's, I don't know, Polygon, there's easy answers. What's great about Bittensor is that there's many layers to this answer until you're getting really deep and philosophical, or there are other layers where you're getting really technical. But let's just say Bittensor is the intersection of crypto / decentralization and AI. So if you wanna create an AI for 1/1000th the cost of ChatGPT or these other centralized AI things, you would use a decentralized crypto token like Bittensor, like TAO. And and there are. Did you ever see in the 90s there was this thing called SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence?
I personally did not see that. No.
So what this did was this organization, SETI, took a picture of the sky every night of the stars, and then they would divide it up into thousands of pieces and send each small piece to a volunteer who was volunteering their computer to run, you know, to run some algorithms on this tiny piece of the sky. And then everybody would send every night all the photos back to the centralized source. And it would figure out if aliens were communicating from outer space. But it was decentralized. So meaning you could be a billion computers connected up to SETI, or a million, or 1,000. Like, it was infinitely scalable. And that's how all these decentralized tokens work, whether it's TAO or other ones. But basically, with TAO, you could divide up an AI problem into thousands of pieces and, send it out to whatever computer is participating in TAO. The people who donate their resources get rewarded in TAO tokens, or, what are called subnet tokens, which we can go over later. And AI is built. AI models are built. And there's all sorts of AI businesses and AI models that use Bittensor for this. It's not just, people think of AI, they think it's just ChatGPT, but there's hundreds and thousands of types of AI businesses out there, of which Bittensor can do any of them. It's amazing.
And you personally have an AI background. So in college, you studied computer science, and I'm assuming that's when you first got into AI, or what was your introduction to AI?
Yeah, so I studied AI as an undergrad, even wrote academically published papers on AI. And then I went to graduate school for AI. And when I was in grad school, I worked on a predecessor of what became Deep Blue, which was the first chess computer in the 90s to beat the world chess champion. So I worked for a little bit on that, and IBM actually offered me a job to continue working on Deep Blue, but I turned it down because I liked a girl and I didn't want to move away. But then we broke up 2 months later, and then I was thrown out of graduate school, so I probably should have taken the job at IBM. And then I've been working on and off on AI ever since, really. So I've had like a multi-decade background in AI.
Deep Blue. So you contributed to Deep Blue, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, originally it was called Chip Test, and then it was called Deep Thought. And then when IBM bought it, because IBM's color is blue, it was called Deep Blue. But it was very interesting because it was actually a new take on AI. So it used to be, people thought, oh, if I'm going to program AI, I need to put as much human intelligence into the program as I can. Like, if, like with chess, people were writing these complicated programs, like, if, the king is being attacked, then that's not good. Or if you have a rook on an open file, and that's good. They were trying to put as much human intelligence as possible into the program. But the innovation of Deep Blue was, hey, speed is more important than quality. And the less human intelligence we can get in here, we'll just figure out who has more pieces, white or black. And that tells you, and then we're going to look at 1 trillion positions a second. So we're going to build the software right into the hardware. And that was kind of the innovation. It became like this supercomputer just devoted to chess. And they proved that was kind of the way that human intelligence was less important than speed. And to this day, that model still works. Like, if you look at ChatGPT, there's not really human programmers don't get involved. What they do is they just have this gigantic neural network, and they throw every piece of text ever written into ChatGPT, and they spend years just crunching this text with neural networks without giving any indication from humans. Oh, he's talking about Bob Dylan here, and this person's talking about relationships here. The neural networks figure out all the contexts, and that was what built the AI. There was no real human intervention until the first version was done. And then there was some human reinforcement learning.
And what first sparked your interest in chess? Because from my research, you later became a grandmaster in chess, right?
Not a grandmaster, but a master. Grandmaster is stronger than me. But yeah, I didn't get into it until later in life, meaning I was about 17. To be really great, you have to start when you're like 5 or 6. but I quickly got very good and, good enough to be a chess master. And I just love the fact that, you kind of disappear into this dangerous world. You're either getting killed or you're killing, but it's like a safe way, just like with all games, it's a safe way to experience the highs and lows of life. And there's so much depth to chess. Culturally, chess is very significant. Like if you look at any TV show, there's usually a chessboard in the background somewhere, and it sort of indicates, oh, this person's a deeper thinker because he's got the chessboard in the background. So there's some cultural significance. And during COVID, the Queen's Gambit came out on Netflix. And so I got into it again. I had stopped playing for 27 years. After I hit the master title, I totally stopped playing because there are business benefits to having the chess master title because of the cultural significance. So I stopped playing completely. But during the Queen's Gambit, I started playing again. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to prove that as an older person, 27 years later, I could be as good as when I was younger. And I'm going to write a book about this. And it's been hard because I have not gotten better than I was when I was younger. When you're old, I shouldn't say when you're old, when you're older, the brain really changes. Like there are fundamental changes physiologically in the brain, which makes it harder to play chess versus kids versus younger people. And so it's been an interesting but difficult time, at least playing. But it's weird because going into it as an older person, I'm like neck deep now in like the chess culture, which I've never was before as a younger person.
And before I wander too far off track here, let's get into what you're doing with Bittensor and TAO Synergies, XTAO.
Sure.
What inspired this idea, first off? And then two, it is currently the largest treasury company of TAO with over 42,000 TAO. So
Yeah.
what inspired this idea?
Well, two things. One is I've been writing about crypto for a long time. So I have a newsletter service of subscribers that subscribe to me for my writing on crypto. And I recommended TAO in October of 2023 when it was $49, went all the way up to 700. Now it's down to like 350 or 340. And so I've always been a fan, or I've always liked TAO, but two things happened. One is probably starting around February with DTAO. I really started to do a deep dive. What is going on here? And as they say, I got TAO-pilled. Like I became obsessed with the depths of how beautiful TAO is structured. Like TAO is not just about AI. It's kind of a small, not a small, but it's like a microcosm of what capitalism should be in its purest form. TAO is like a pure form of capitalism. Again, not just AI. Like, just as a sidebar, I know we do a lot of sidebars. I could recreate Uber within TAO. So I can say, I can make a subnet called Uber. The miners are drivers who have empty seats and are willing to sell those empty seats. The validators are people who take queries from customers. Oh, let's say a customer says, "Oh, I need a ride from downtown New York to uptown New York." The validator could match the customer with the particular miner who has a car willing to go from downtown to uptown. The subnet handles the transaction and customer service and all that kind of stuff. So you could recreate like a multi-billion-dollar company, Uber, just totally within TAO. It's people focus on AI, which is great, but you can recreate almost any digital company within Bittensor TAO. So and I think that will happen eventually, like maybe years, but it'll happen eventually. But here's the other thing. So back in January, a company reached out to me. It was a public company, Upexi, and they're like, "Hey, can you tell us more about Bitcoin? We want to do a Bitcoin thing like Michael Saylor is doing with MicroStrategy." And I said, "You shouldn't do that. There's only one Michael Saylor, and you don't even know anything about Bitcoin. Don't do that. It's not like they're gonna stop asking Michael Saylor to go to conferences and ask you instead. Like you don't know anything." But I said to him, "Why don't you find some other token to do this strategy around and be a little innovative?" And so he eventually did Solana, and that was like the first Solana treasury company. They raised like about 100 million, and it's been somewhat successful of raising, doing this. So then suddenly there was a lot of Me Too Solana companies, and every bank was calling me, and every shell was calling me like, hey, we want to do a $200 million deal with Hype, blah blah blah, or whatever, and we want to use XYZ company. And I kept thinking, what's the benefit of doing $200 million? Like, it only helps the banker. They raise 7% and then they're gone. And all the shareholders, the stock jumps up and then all the shareholders bail. And if I was advising, I would be having a long-term deal. So I'm not going to benefit. The management team's not going to benefit. Like, it seemed all these big deals that were happening were stupid. So I called a friend of mine who ran a public company. It was a failed Alzheimer's drug company, and they had about 15 million cash in the bank. And I said, look, there's this, don't think about, I want to do a crypto strategy, but don't do Bitcoin, Solana, Ethereum. Those are too big. Like, the most innovative token out there is TAO. And I explained it to my friend. And I said, let's not raise any money. You already have 15 million in cash. Let's just do it. Like, then if we want to, the money will be available. Like, that's no problem. Let's just do the strategy. Like, the company was trading below its net asset value. It had 15 million in cash. It was trading for like $10 million market cap. So I said, let's just buy TAO. So to his credit, my friend's credit, he did it. We changed the name of the company to TAO Synergies, changed the symbol to TAOX. We right away bought $15 million worth of TAO, and we're off to the races. So that's really how it got started.
And I've seen you put out the number of you guys are going to get to 100 million in TAO. Is that going to be through future raises or
Yeah,
what's the plan
through
there?
future raises. Like, for that first time, so when we had 15 million in cash, we did just a friends and family $5 million raise. I led the raise, and uh and there's nobody in the company. It's just my friend and I and a CFO and another board member, and we're just going in there, buying TAO. And uh you know, it's interesting because with this new administration and this new SEC commissioner, nobody's really saying, are these cryptos securities or not? Like, if you're a public company, you can't really buy other stocks. Like, there's something called the 40 Act of the SEC where there's a lot more regulations, but now it doesn't apply. So cryptos are not considered securities. So you're really going from being an operating business to almost being like an asset manager. And the asset we're managing is TAO. And the challenge for treasury companies, whether it's Bitcoin or Solana or TAO, is not how much TAO you're buying, but how you are increasing the tokens per share. And so, MicroStrategy, if you had like a bunch of shares of MicroStrategy, maybe they were worth 1 Bitcoin 2 years ago, but now they're worth 2 Bitcoin. Now because he's borrowed and used all this preferred stock to buy more Bitcoin, every common share now has access to twice as many Bitcoins as it had a few years ago. So that's the goal of a treasury company, is to use innovative ways to create more TAO tokens per share. So for a TAO treasury company. So for all these treasury companies, whether it's XTAO, TAOX, Oblong, by the way, Oblong, I knew very well too. I knew the CEO, and it was a long story, I'll make short, but he asked me to do a TAO treasury company with him, but I was already going to do it with what became TAOX. So, but I like the Oblong guys too. None of us are competitors. We're all, despite what anyone says, like, if I don't care if someone buys XTAO, if someone buys TAOX, if someone buys, there's a company in Norway was just announced, MBX. There's Cefello in Sweden, I think it is. There's companies all over the place. We're only going to go up if TAO goes up, and we're going to go down if TAO goes down. Like, it's not like one stock's going to go up, the other stock's going to go down, even if TAO goes from 300 to 1,000. So the idea that there's any competition is silly.
And you said the metric to judge there is tokens per share. That's what a successful treasury company is you get more tokens per share. Is your playbook going to be like Michael Saylor's with his accretive dilution and raising debt? Or is it going to be you operate a validator and do some other things in the ecosystem?
Great question. And these are questions every treasury company is asking. First off, I'll give a very specific example. Yes, Michael Saylor has done all of this accretive dilution, meaning sell more, borrow money or sell more convertible debt or whatever. Use your what's called your capital structure to raise money and then buy more Bitcoin. Ultimately, it is dilutive. It's only accretive if Bitcoin goes up, which of course Michael Saylor thinks it will. So he's done a very good job. Another company, Semler Scientific, they were a medical equipment company, but they became the second all-in Bitcoin treasury company after Michael Saylor. They trade for 1 times NAV because they don't really do anything to increase their tokens per share. So it means they're just like a ETF or a closed-end fund. But Michael Saylor, they trade for more like 2 times NAV because he's very creative how he's doing it. So with TAO, though, it's different because first off, you can ask the question, why buy TAOX or XTAO or Oblong when I could just buy TAO? Well, TAO is actually difficult to stake. There's a lot of nuances in staking TAO, and you can get a lot of yield, better than you can get almost anywhere else from staking TAO. But if I just buy TAO and I'm a retail investor and I figure out the TAO wallet or I buy TAO on Coinbase, you're not really going to get that much in staking. So it's a good reason to have TAO as a proxy through the equity markets. The other thing is you can't put TAO in your 401k through crypto. The best way is to buy a treasury company and put your 401k, TAO in your 401k through a publicly traded company. But with TAO, you can increase your tokens per share through staking or buying or starting a validator. XTAO, to their credit, just announced. Let me turn this off. XTAO just announced that they're starting a validator. Credit to them. The problem with starting a validator is then you've got to now market your validator. You're competing against really good validators to get business. So maybe you just use it to validate the tokens you've bought. Okay. But, Yuma, DCG, Barry Silbert, he's a good validator, which has a relationship with BitCo, which is the big institutional buyer of crypto. So, with validator, you have to figure out how you're going to run that business. So that's a little more complicated. By the way, we've considered it. We're considering all the options. You could buy a validator. You could do mining. You could buy a subnet. You could start a subnet. You could do everything Michael Saylor is doing. You could borrow and buy more TAO with the idea that the TAO is going to go up, or your staking is going to pay for your interest while you wait for the TAO to go up. So that's a good idea. The other thing is, I noticed that although there were very good podcasts like yours and Mark Jeffries and several others, there's Revenue Search with Siam and Mark with DSV. There's Novelty Search with Jake. I noticed there wasn't really like the equivalent of a CoinDesk for TAO. So CoinDesk, which started around, I guess, 2012, was a really important thing for Bitcoin. Nobody knew what Bitcoin was. Bitcoin needed its evangelist, and it needed a way to explain easily what was happening in the Bitcoin world to retail investors who had no clue what Bitcoin was. So I decided, look, let's follow the Bitcoin playbook because it was a very successful playbook. And I haven't launched it yet, but if you check out, I'm going to launch it within the next few days. So probably it's up maybe by the time this comes out. But if you look at TAOdaily.io, I'm setting up essentially a CoinDesk for TAO. And I've already got like a dozen or so contributors. Anyone listening to this, I'm more than happy to have you contribute articles if you're enthusiastic about TAO or the subnets or whatever it is about, I basically want this site to be not fake news. It's all facts and news about TAO and the subnets, but in a way that's easy for people to understand and use. And so I've set up this site. I have a background building websites, so it was easy for me to do. And I've got an editor for it. I've got about a dozen contributors or more, and more people every day. And we already have a ton of content on there about different subnets, about TAO. I just wrote an article, 7 catalysts for why TAO is going to go up soon. Somebody else wrote an article about how to do text to image generation using TAO, basically through Subnet 19. And it's great. We've got like probably over 100 articles and videos on there already. I think we've got some Ventura Labs videos up there. And of course, I point to your, YouTube so that you get the benefit of it. And that's another thing too, is I wanted to benefit the entire community. CoinDesk is just about what their writers are doing, but I wanted the entire community to feel a part of what I'm doing with TAO Daily. So I'm trying to create, ultimately, as I generate traffic, I'm going to spread the traffic throughout the whole community, so everybody gets viewers.
And you have a history in Bitcoin as well. As early as 2017, you've been a believer and evangelist for Bitcoin. What do you think were the pivotal moments for Bitcoin adoption to lead it to where it is now? And how can TAO replicate those same things?
Well, first off, I was on CNBC in 2013 talking about Bitcoin. So what happened was, at that time in 2013, I was doing every Thursday, and I did this for 5 years. Every Thursday, I would do a 1-hour Q&A on Twitter about whatever topics. And somebody in March of 2013, someone asked me, what do you think of Bitcoin? And I said, it's probably a scam. Seems like a Ponzi scheme. And Naval Ravikant called me up, and he's a big Bitcoin guy. Naval Ravikant calls me up, and he says, look, James, I'm going to be in New York. We need to sit down, and I'm going to explain to you from beginning to end what Bitcoin is. And we got together, we had like a whiteboard. He's drawn all over it. We spent the day together. And by the end, I was so blown away by Bitcoin. And I was writing a book at a time called Choose Yourself. And Bitcoin felt to me like a choose yourself currency. Like, I didn't need some bank to accept me as a client. I didn't need to use, intermediaries to make payments I wanted to make. Like Bitcoin, there's so many things that it's like you're your own bank. I mean, I'm oversimplifying Bitcoin, but this was my feeling then. And so I was releasing this book called Choose Yourself. And a month before I was releasing it, I created a Bitcoin only store, and there was only one product in it, which was my book. I was selling my book for 1/10 of a Bitcoin. Bitcoin was $61 at the time. I was selling my book, Choose Yourself, a PDF of it for 1/10 of a Bitcoin. I think we had about 70 customers spend 1/10 of a Bitcoin to get a PDF of my book. And it was a kind of a marketing gimmick a little bit to market my book, but it was also for me to explore Bitcoin. It was an experiment for me. And then I even went on CNBC, and the anchor said, did you just do this as a marketing trick? And I said, well, I'm on national TV, so it worked. And I feel bad for those people who spent $12,000 now for a PDF of my book, but yeah, I've been doing Bitcoin since 2013, and yeah, I think TAO is very much like Bitcoin, and we could get into that, but just from a marketing perspective, and also from what I was saying before about differentiating TAO Synergies, is that as an evangelist for TAO, and as someone who's really maybe more expert in media than others, like I've had a lot of media outlets, and I've written quite a bit, and I've been on TV quite a bit. I understand how to spread the word about something. And that's why I built this TAO Daily. That's why I'm involving the community. That's why I'm, from an editorial perspective, I'm making sure the articles are very easy to understand and not very kind of, oh, you have to be in one of the cool TAO kids to understand. And, we'll see how it works. Again, I haven't launched it officially yet, but within the next day or so I will. And it's a fun say. And that differentiates TAO Synergies. And look, it potentially gets me opportunities. I'll learn the subnets better. I'll be able to invest in the subnets better. So it'll get me opportunities to make a lot more tokens per share, maybe, than anybody else.
Do you think TAO Synergies will ever actively invest in subnets?
I mean, I can't say for sure because it's a public company and that would be signaling, but I myself am interested in going in that direction. I mean, I think that's where, obviously, if the subnets do well, TAO does well. And obviously, it's also like anything, there's an 80-20 rule with the subnets. 20% of the subnets will provide 80% of the value. So if people are looking to invest in all the subnets and make a lot of money, that's a mistake. You got to use a VC style analysis to figure out what the good subnets are. And that's a challenge, which is another reason why being involved in the media side, I'm able to just call up subnets and talk to them, and also being on the investment side as well. So I do see that as very viable, as a potentially very strong strategy for any public treasury company. And I think also the yield, just getting more technical here, the yield right now on TAO, 2 months ago, it was 20% if you staked in root. Now it's 8%, and it's going down to 3% because a lot of the staking is happening more and more in the subnets. So you have to get familiar with the subnets to really maximize your benefit from TAO.
Do you think the APY of these subnets is reminiscent of some of those crazy APYs we've seen with Ethereum in the past?
Yeah, I mean, and that will calm down. That's why you're going to have to do real, thorough venture cap. Like I see people arguing in the discords and they're using like candlesticks and charts to say which subnet's going up. That will never. By the way, that doesn't even work for stocks, but people think it does. But it will definitely never work on these subnets. That's like using charts to analyze a venture capital startup. Like it's not going to work. So you have to really, to understand which subnets and which alpha tokens are going to go up, you have to really do a deep dive on the subnet. Is the subnet have a big market? Are they executing properly? Is it a good product? Is the management team great? But then it's even harder than VC style analysis because you have to understand, are the alpha tokens going to do well if this subnet succeeds? That's not always the case. That's not even the case in the crypto world often. Like you're familiar with Uniswap, the exchange. So it's an exchange built on top of Ethereum. The Uniswap exchange is doing very well, but the Uni token, people don't realize it. The Uni token does not benefit from the success of the Uniswap exchange. The Uni token is, you buy the Uni token, you buy the Uni token if you want to vote on protocol changes on the Uniswap exchange. Who cares about that? Like no one, I don't want to vote. Nobody wants to vote on the Uniswap exchange, but there's no other benefit to owning the Uni token. So there's no reason. I think that's like a scam. People are buying the Uni token because they think it's correlated to the growth in the Uniswap exchange. The same way a share of McDonald's is correlated to the growth of the McDonald's company, but it's not. And that's what you have to be careful of in crypto, is that the tokens, I remember this with Zcash back in 2018. I loved Zcash. I love the technology. It's privacy coin. But the Zcash token, people were using the Zcash technology without it benefiting the Zcash token. And that's why the Zcash token never went anywhere. You got to be careful with that in crypto in general. And in these subnets also, make sure you really understand how are these, and there's no site, by the way, which will answer these questions for you. So that's another purpose for TAO Daily. But you have to really understand, how will these subnet tokens benefit from the success of the subnet? Really make sure they will. I'll give TAO as an example. TAO doesn't make, the Bittensor network, TAO doesn't really make revenues in the traditional sense, but there is a very natural demand for the TAO token. Like if I want to start a subnet, and the reason a subnet you could think of as like a company that's being built on top of Bittensor. That's oversimplifying, but think of it that way. So if I want to start a subnet, because I could start a multi-billion-dollar company potentially for 1/1000th the cost if I'm a subnet on TAO. If I want to start a subnet on TAO, I've got to stake a whole bunch of TAO. And then every validator on my subnet has to also stake a whole bunch of TAO. And some miners in some of the subnets have to stake TAO. So that's natural demand for TAO. So I might want to be a speculator. I might want to buy a TAO token because I think some subnets are going to be successful. And as the number of subnets increase, that's more and more demand for the TAO token because you cannot start a subnet without the TAO token. So if I have the TAO token, I will benefit from that increase in demand as the number of subnets increase. Also, some of the subnets require TAO as payment for services. That's more demand. And meanwhile, all these TAO subnets, that are staking TAO in order to do what they're doing, they're reducing supply because they're staking. Something like 80 or 90% of TAO is staked. So that removes supply. So let's say the subnet cap goes from 128 to 1,000. The demand for TAO is going to increase so much, particularly as people see, oh, I could create a successful company this way. The demand for TAO tokens are going to increase so much, you can't even speculate how high the TAO token will go. It's not like a 10x. It might not even be 100x. It might be 500x for all we know. It's ridiculous to even speculate, but it's going to increase a lot as the subnet cap goes higher. So that's natural demand for the TAO token. It's not like bullshit demand like the Uni versus Uniswap.
There is a proposal out right now to increase the subnet limit to 256 and bring back subnet deregistrations. Do you
Yes.
see this as something that is necessary for TAO, the deregistrations and increasing the subnet limit?
Yes, absolutely. Deregistrations is a tricky one. I could go either way on that. I almost don't have an opinion, but because it doesn't really matter that much. Like if you make the subnet limit infinite, then it doesn't matter if subnets are deregistered or not. That only matters if there's a finite supply of subnets. But the only reason the number of subnets was capped at 128 was to basically test if the TAO network could handle the load. But okay, now the TAO network can clearly handle the load, so they're increasing it to 256. Eventually, it'll be infinite. So, but every time they increase that subnet cap, the demand for TAO is going to go way up, and that's going to benefit the price of TAO a lot. And there's of course the TAO halving, which means there's going to be less TAO available. If I want to start a subnet and I need to buy TAO, well, there's going to be less TAO for sale available every day than there was because of the TAO halving. And all of these things are going to kind of happen around the same time in Q4 of 2025. So that's why I was so eager to start TAO Synergies, because now's the time. This is the window before these two big catalysts happen. This is the window to buy TAO. And I'm not trying to shill TAO. Nothing I say is going to move the price of TAO. It's just that I was excited to get in before these, with a public company, before these two major catalysts happened.
Do you think there will be any specific subnet sectors, like compute or other sectors, that are successful or we will be successful or better designed for Bittensor?
Well, compute's an amazing one. So what compute is basically kind of like the SETI project I mentioned earlier, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Let's say I want to build an AI company that requires, or I want to build an AI data center that requires 2,000 NVIDIA GPUs. Well, I don't have $100 million lying around to build that data center. And Elon Musk does, but only a few people do. But if I really need 2,000 GPUs, no problem. I can use Subnet 4, which is Targon, and they have 2,000 NVIDIA GPUs that are among the miners. Those miners are getting rewards every day. Targon gets to spend $0. They use their Subnet tokens as rewards, and they've aggregated 2,000 NVIDIA GPUs. And now if I'm creating my own ChatGPT, I get to use all that, paying 1/100th the price I might have to pay like an OpenAI to use that compute. So that's one segment. Another segment might be like, oh, I want to put a chatbot on my website, a customer service chatbot on my website. I don't know how to. I'm a dentist. I don't know how to program AI. So how do I do this? Well, Shoots hosts all these open source AI models, and just with a little bit of no code instruction from the dentist, he can get a widget from Shoots, put it on his website, and now the customers can chat to this AI chat bot about their teeth, and boom, Shoots has thousands of customers, and that's an interesting case where they are using their revenues to buy back tokens, to burn tokens. And so if I own the tokens and I think Shoots is going to have bigger and bigger revenues, and the alpha will go up accordingly because they're burning the tokens, well, this is great for me because I'm getting the tokens cheap now. So that's a case where the tokenomics probably work out in favor of the investor if you think Shoots is going to grow as a business.
How do you see the utility of those tokens with the
Oh,
buybacks?
by the way, you asked about segments in AI. There's some amazing subnets out there. Like, I love learning about AI by reading about the different and researching the different subnets. Like, there's Yanez. I forget what number they are.
54.
And 54. So Yanez is, let's say I'm a bank and I need to make sure there aren't terrorists or criminals, doing fraudulent activity in my bank. So there's all sorts of compliance laws. And then there's all sorts of tricks that the criminals do. And those laws and those tricks are constantly changing. The tricks are getting better and better, and the laws are getting more and more complicated. So Yanez is an amazing use case of AI. They're creating, let's say, a data set of the miners are creating, I should say, a data set of 1 million fake identities that might be hard to identify as criminals in a banking system. And they're creating fake identities, fake transactions, doing all this stuff. It's very complicated to do this, but they're using AI to do it. The miners are using, and the validators are picking the best AI created data sets. And then banks are the customers, and the subnet figures out if the banks are really being good at identifying which identities are fake and which aren't. What an amazing use case for a Bittensor subnet. OpenAI is never going to do that. And this is potentially a multi-billion-dollar industry. Like, there are huge centralized competitors, but those centralized competitors, they're capped on the amount of AI they can use, on the amount of employees they can have. Yanez is not capped. They could have millions of miners contributing these data sets. So, fascinating use case. A use case that's definitely, Yanez is definitely going to end up being better than its centralized competitors. So that's just another segment.
While we're on the topic of subnets, since you, I guess, partnered with the biotech company to make the TAO Treasury company, what's your take on Metanova and what they're doing there, being one of the only biotech sector subnets?
Metanova, so I've read about them and I know about them, and I think what they're doing is great, but I haven't done, to be fair, the deep dive. Like, I'd really want to know, is this, and I don't know the answers, so maybe you know the answers. Are there customers, like, are pharmaceutical companies lining up to be customers? I just don't know the answer. I haven't looked into deeply. Or is it just a research project? Sometimes I worry some of these subnets are just research projects that other people for fun want to mine just to help, but there's not an underlying business. Now, I think there could be an underlying business. That's why I'm asking. I mean, easily pharmaceutical companies could be the customers. I just don't know enough. So it could be very interesting, but I don't know. And I am scheduled to talk to them at some point.
Yeah, they say pharmaceutical companies, drug development companies. So anybody that wants to develop drugs.
Yeah, it's kind of like how Google, I don't know what Google called it, but they won the Nobel Prize in chemistry for using AI to come up with new compounds. And again, anything scalable is ultimately going to beat the things that aren't scalable. Decentralized means scalable, centralized means not scalable. And the proof of that is, look, people are asking, well, how can decentralized AI compete with Facebook, which is spending $250 million on bringing in AI programmers? Well, guess what? You can only bring in so many people if you're spending $250 million per programmer. Like, that is not scalable. And there's thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of AI developers out there. Bittensor can appeal to all of those and reward financially all of those and get the very best talent from all over the world. Ultimately, that's scalable. And I'll give you an example where decentralization, there's many examples, but I'll give you at least one example where decentralization conquered the world. So let's say 1990, every company they needed to network their computers together and maybe network with the outside world. So they'd go to the store and they'd buy networking software. Well, that entire industry disappeared because of open source, decentralized networking called the internet. There was the TCP/IP protocol, basically created by the Department of Defense in 1971, but then used by universities after that. And then suddenly, here's this decentralized, scalable, infinitely scalable networking product. Every corporation in the world now uses that. The entire genre, the entire business category of networking software has completely disappeared. The entire job category of networking software engineers is gone. It's just over. And so that's what's going to happen with AI. Scalable decentralization is going to just wipe out centralization. Maybe not tomorrow, because OpenAI is great. There's great stuff out there, but it has to happen eventually. Another area is news. Okay, I can turn on MSNBC for my news, but that's just like 12 reporters. I know what their bias is. I know what their news sources are. There's nothing interesting there. But Twitter is decentralized news. I don't need to get a job at MSNBC. It's permissionless, so I have permission to use Twitter to be a journalist and to spread news about something. And that has good sides and bad sides, but so does centralized news. And I would say Twitter and X has wiped out the news industry. It's just the news industry doesn't know it yet. So, it's the end of the news industry. And we've been saying this for a decade, but we see it happen now.
What do you think will be the new jobs that are created with the popularization of AI and these language models becoming widespread?
So I was talking to, so a lot of people are afraid that AI is going to replace jobs and there's not going to be, unlike previous technological revolutions, there's not going to be new jobs to replace them. Like when in the invention of cars, all the people who rode horse carriages became drivers. All the people who worked on, things for horses, I guess, became the mechanics. With computers, all the people who typed on typewriters typed on computers, and so on. So people are afraid the same thing's not going to happen, but that's not true. I talked to the CEO of freelance.org or freelance.com. It's the biggest freelancing site in the world. He said since AI, we've gone from 6 million freelancers signed up to the site to 60 million. Because now, let's say me, I've never been a graphic designer in my life, but let's say a record label advertises or posts on freelance.com, hey, I need a logo designer for my new album. Okay, well, now I can use sophisticated AI programs to make a AI logo. In fact, I can make 20 logos in a day. And like this guy was telling me, it used to be a logo designer would make one logo every 2 weeks and charge, $1,000. Now I can make 20 logos in a day, charge, $30 and make so much more than I could have. I wouldn't have, I didn't have the skills to be a logo designer before. I didn't know how to use Photoshop, but now I could use Midjourney and I could use 19.ai, Subnet 19 on Bittensor to edit my photos very quickly. It's much faster than Midjourney. And so there's so many more opportunities now for solopreneurs, freelancers to use AI to do all the things I used to hire people to do. And which makes it seem like there's going to be less jobs, but actually just creates more and more opportunities for people. Companies, every single company, every single big company, and every division of that company is now using AI to increase profits, increase productivity, and so on. And they're using AI for that. But you need people you need to hire people who know how to use AI, who've learned AI. This increase in productivity increases the amount of cash that's in society. So when a company becomes more productive, it means they can make their product cheaper and their profit margins can still stay held. They can even bring down the price of their products because technology is deflationary. They could bring down the price of their products, but still have more money because their profits are higher. And then more cash in society means more business opportunities, means more houses will be bought, means more houses will be constructed, means more technologies will be created. I mean, the pace of AI innovation is enormous, which again means more jobs will be created. So the net effect is more money in society and more industries are developed, innovations faster, and more jobs are created.
In society broadly, outside of the AI category, what are some sectors that you think will benefit the most going into the future?
From what?
Just what do you think will see the most growth? What are the sectors you're essentially most bullish on?
Well, obviously AI. AI is just unbelievable. I mean, we're doing this at 11 a.m. I've probably used Grok and actually 19.ai, hundreds of times today so far. It's replaced Google search for me. It's replaced almost, I used beautiful.ai to create a PowerPoint presentation. I don't even have Microsoft PowerPoint, and you can use all these AI tools to create beautiful PowerPoint presentations. So AI is nothing is stopping that. And then what's happening is every other company is now every company now is an AI company. So Caterpillar makes tractors. All right, well, what does that have to do? Caterpillar is an AI company now because a tractor can now sense when there's weeds underneath it. So using AI, so it'll save on weed spray and make more money. Oh, a tractor's going to be self-driving. So now the farmer can while his self-driving tractor is spreading, spraying weeds more efficiently, but doing an auto driving, the farmer can focus on more, business strategic goals and be more efficient with his time and grow his business more. So it's really, if every company is turning into an AI company, and of course, crypto is growing huge. People will say, well, what do I need Bitcoin for? Why would I ever use Bitcoin? Well, guess what? The biggest use case right now of crypto, and it's also the oldest use case of crypto, is stablecoins. So Tether started in, I think, 2014. Last year, there were $27.6 trillion worth of stablecoin transactions, more than Visa and MasterCard combined. And Scott Bessent, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, has come out and said, this is growing. This entire industry, the stablecoin industry, is growing by at least 15 to 20x within the next few years. So this is an enormous use case of crypto. By the way, that means infrastructure is needed. You can't just have a dollar bill without a bank, without a stock exchange, without a mortgage broker, without mortgage insurance. So huge industries developed around dollars. And so huge industries are going to slash cryptos are going to grow around stablecoins. So there's Aave and Syrup, which are the biggest lenders into stablecoins. There's Curve and Fluid, which are the biggest stablecoin exchanges. There's ENA and Sky, which are cryptos that issue other stablecoins. There's, Injective and Hyperliquid, which, make exchanges for stablecoins. So you need all these crypto. So crypto, if stablecoin industry grows 10x, all the cryptos in the infrastructure are going to grow 50x. And then, of course, there's AI and there's decentralized physical infrastructure, aka AI in this case. So you have TAO, which is the leader in that, and TAO AI is only going to grow from a $3 trillion industry to a $30 trillion industry, and decentralized AI is going to be a bigger and bigger percentage of that. TAO market cap is worth $3 billion, and we're talking about a percentage of a $30 trillion of an eventual $30 trillion industry. So, that alone, TAO is going to be $100,000. So it's going to be the leader in the space forever. So, these are things I'm very excited about. Those are the two main industries, stablecoins and AI, that I'm excited about.
Stablecoins and AI.
And by the way, biotech, of course, but that's like kind of an after effect of AI because of things like Metanova.
Okay, because you think AI will just accelerate biotech to the point where we start seeing gene editing and all these other things.
AI is an accelerator on every industry on the planet.
Okay. And then to go into that biotech stuff, this is something that recently just caught me way off guard about you and really opened up my mind to how many different things you do. Is you're in the Bryan Johnson documentary on Netflix. How did this happen?
Well, Bryan Johnson made Venmo, and hold on. And Venmo back in the day was very interesting because, again, it sort of avoids the intermediaries of the banks. And he had a very interesting story even back then. So I interviewed him for my book, Choose Yourself, which came out in 2013. More recently, Bryan Johnson's been spending famously $2 million a year on improving his lifespan. And so I interviewed him on my podcast. The great thing about having a successful podcast, as you're realizing, is that you could just call anyone and say, hey, can I ask you some questions, please? And they're more likely to answer than if you don't have a podcast. So I called Bryan and I said, hey, come on my podcast and I'll ask you all about what you're doing. And so he did. And I didn't even know he was going to do this, but I'm happy he did it. He took a video snippet from my interview with him on the podcast and put it on his Netflix documentary. So I was very proud that he did that.
And then having a successful podcast like you do, what made you start your podcast? Because you've been podcasting as far back as 2015, I believe.
Yeah. Oh my God, 10 years of doing this. And I've done, I don't know, last year I was saying I did 1,500 episodes. I've done so much more now. But yeah, I was very curious about people and I wanted a vehicle to just call them and ask, like I was saying. So for instance, when I was interested, we talked earlier, I'm interested in chess. So I've had on Garry Kasparov, one of the greatest players in history. He was the world champion. I've had on Vishwanathan Anand. He was a world champion. I've had on I had on Judith Polgar, the best female chess player in history. I was interested in stand-up comedy. I've had on the most famous stand-up comedians. I'm interested, I've had on dozens of billionaires because I've been interested in entrepreneurship. I even wrote a book based on it called Think Like a Billionaire. I've had on, dozens of, during COVID, I called up every, well-known epidemiologist, doctor, RFK Jr. was on my podcast. Like I've had on, and Marty McCary, who now is like the head of, I don't know, health or whatever. He was on the podcast. This is long before they were in the Trump administration. And, I have on people I agree with. I have on people I disagree with. I don't know, name like any industry I've ever been curious about. I've had on like the best people from that industry and interviewed them. I had on Danica Patrick, one of the greatest race car drivers ever. I've had on all sorts of actors, athletes, musicians. Coolio, my favorite rapper from the 90s. He's been on the podcast. So it's just been fun.
Would you describe that as your philosophy of just kind of wandering around following your interests?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to, it's not just your interest. You have to be good at something, you have to be obsessed. The person who's obsessed will always, if there's a competition, the person who's obsessed will always beat out the person who is not obsessed, because obsession fills up. It's like a river that just fills up all the dry areas, and nothing could stop it. Whereas if you're only casually interested in something, you're not going to really be, it's not going to be like 24 hours a day. You're thinking about it and want to learn and have questions and are curious. So I would say whatever I'm obsessed about, I pursue. And then also, what's the point of doing things you're not obsessed about? Now, it doesn't mean you're going to be obsessed every day. Like take TAO. I'm really obviously obsessed with this, and TAO Synergies is a public company. TAO is a crypto. When the prices go down 5 days in a row, I'm not necessarily a happy person. I like to see it go up every day like everyone else. But, but it empowers me forward because I am obsessed. Like, oh, I want to explain this to people so they see what I see. And so it helps me, and it helps the TAO ecosystem too, when there's more people like me and you and so on who are trying to explain this relatively complex idea and to make it as easy as possible for people to use. So, but yeah, when I become obsessed with something, like I became obsessed with stand-up comedy around 2015 or 2014, I forget the year. And I started literally from zero. All day long, I would watch comedians on YouTube. And then every night I did this. I eventually started doing this 6 nights a week, 2 times a night, performing stand-up comedy. So I've been up, whatever that is, for years. I did this. So in 1 year would be like, I would be going up, I don't know, 500 times performing. And then over years, you finally start to get good at something. It's not easy. There's not really a talent equation. Like, you need to put in your hours. And, I got good enough. I was performing all over the country and parts of Europe. Heck, someone just asked me to perform all over Hungary, but now I'm obsessed with something else, so I said no. Um, but then I got obsessed with chess again as an older person, starting in the pandemic, and I just started playing, like, much to the chagrin of my wife. Some days I was playing 20 hours a day, and then I started taking lessons, and I started writing about chess for the major chess magazines. I've been on TV commentating about the World Championship, and it's been an interesting a round trip for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love being obsessed in things. Although that gives that when you're obsessed with something, though, it's you there's more opportunities for heartbreak. When you're obsessed with, a girl, and she says, and you're rejected, or she breaks up with you, you're heartbroken. And if I'm obsessed with chess and I lose a game, I'm heartbroken. If I'm obsessed with Tao and things aren't working out, I'd be heartbroken. So far, so good. Things are working out.
How do you realize when you're obsessed with something? Because comedy kind of seems like way off to the side of everything else that you've done.
Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't really know, but you do something and you think to yourself, I have to do more of that. Obsession is similar to addiction. So, like, if you play a game of chess and you lose, well, I got to play at least one more now to win. And if you win, well, I'm just going to keep playing until I lose. So it becomes like an addiction. And same thing with comedy. Like, if you go up and you don't perform well, I got to go back tomorrow and prove that I'm better than I was tonight. And when you do well, it feels so good. It's so much dopamine. Oh, I got to do this again tomorrow night. And and then to get good, though, you realize, oh, but I have to study. It's not like it's easy. All of these things are difficult. So what does Louis C.K. do that I don't do? And oh my God, he's so good at this. I got to find the next tier down and see what they do that I don't do. And then I take video of my comedy and then look at it later. What did I do wrong? Did I and ah too much? Did I not move around the stage correctly? Am I using the mic correctly? Am I interacting with the audience? Was I sensing if the audience is responding to me? If one part of the audience is and one part of the audience isn't, how do I connect? It's called tribe building. How do I connect the two parts of the audience? Like, you learn every skill is really a combination of sub skills. So to get good, there's no such skill as business skill. To get good at business, you need to be good at, like, understanding marketing, understanding leadership, understanding sales, which is different from marketing, understanding product development, understanding product market fit, understanding capital structure and fundraising. So there's all these sub skills to getting good at this one skill. To understand crypto, there's a lot of different sub skills, but particularly with Tao, you have to understand what Tao is. How is the incentive mechanisms built? What are the tokenomics? Understanding all the subnets. So there's all these sub skills: chess, openings, endings, middle games, tactics, all these sub skills. So obsession helps you passionately learn all that you don't know and figure out what it is you don't know and be humble about it too. So, again, I mentioned to you earlier, I got worried. I was interested in thing to thing to thing. So I was worried I was being a jack of all trades, master of none. Probably the only consistent thing throughout my whole career is that I've been a writer. So I've been writing books since the 90s. I write every single day, and I read every day good authors to try to get better at writing. That's the one thing that I've consistently done for let's say 30 years.
And in writing, I think I read somewhere that you write 3,000 words every day. And you told me earlier you have 25 published books. What
Yeah.
started this obsession with writing?
Sometimes the weirdest things start an obsession. Like, when I was in college, there was this girl I had a crush on, and I had a friend who was a pseudo writer. Like, oh, he read Thomas Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow, and he read James Joyce's Ulysses, and he always would talk that he was going to be a big novelist. And she felt like, this girl I had a crush on fell in love with my friend who was a writer. And I was thinking, you know what, I could be a better writer than him. And so I started reading a lot, like, obsessively, and I started writing 3,000 words a day. And by the way, you have to have a little bit of what's it called when you think you're better than you are? It's this paradox. Shoot, I forget what it is, but I definitely thought I was a better writer than I was for many, many years. For probably like 5, 6 years, I would write 3,000 words a day, thinking I was God's gift to writing. When I was horrible, I wrote novel after novel after novel, none of them published, and I couldn't look at my own stuff and say this is horrible. Now I can see it was horrible, but that kept me going. You have to have a little bit of this foolishness to keep going, because you're always bad at something when you start, but you need to continue, and you need the dopamine that of being good to continue. So you have to fool yourself into thinking you're better than you are.
The
The same
idea
thing with comedy. The only way I really know that I got at least to mediocre level in comedy is that other people would ask me to tour with them. And so then I figured, okay, I'm getting validated a little bit. You can't always choose yourself for everything. You have to have somebody give you feedback and tell you you're not as good as you think you are, or you are getting pretty good.
having that delusional self-confidence of thinking you're better than you are, is that actually a problem? How much should people value the opinion of others here to validate what they're doing?
You can't really value anybody's opinion ever. You can listen, and then you could judge for yourself. Is there a good reason behind their opinion? So, sometimes you have enough experience in an area to say, you know what, this person did not give me what I think is a good opinion. Like he didn't back it up or she didn't back it up. And so then you really have to kind of validate the opinion for yourself and use sources and learn. And this is a great use case for AI, is to learn something very quickly. Um, but it's really hard. It's really hard to know if anything is true. Like nobody really, I can give you a million reasons why Tau, for instance, might go up, but someone else give me a million reasons why it's going to go down. And I will have self-doubt until I research and study and you try to steel man your opinion. So steel man means, let's say I stand for something, I should argue the opposite case as well as or better than I'm arguing for my opinion. So this way I learn what the other side is, and I try to figure out if that's true or not. So I can make the steelman case why Tau is going down, but I've steelmanned it a lot, and I'm more on the side that Tau is going up quite a bit. But same thing with Bitcoin. But it's very hard. It's hard even to validate your own opinion, let alone others.
Another thing I read about you in my research, you can tell me if this is true or not, is you founded or co-founded 20 companies and 17 of those 20 failed.
Yeah. I mean, now it's probably a few more on either side of that. But if my first big company did succeed, I was making websites for Fortune 100 companies. Like I made AmericanExpress.com, I made TimeWarner.com, HBO.com. Every gangster rap record label, I made their website. This is in the 90s. Nobody had websites until I made them. And I sold that company, made a lot of money, and then I went completely broke. And it was so depressing. I had generational wealth, and I was super rich. And then I went completely broke. And when I say broke, I had $143 in my bank account at the bottom. And no money anywhere else. Like I had to really rebuild from scratch, and nobody was helping me, because everyone helps you on the way up and they're all your friend when you have a lot of money. When you're going down, people smell the failure and they just stay far away. Nobody's your friend, not even family members. And so I got depressed, even suicidal, and I had to really bounce back. And so one thing I just kind of stumbled into doing was this daily exercise I still do, which is I write down 10 ideas every day. And they don't have to be good ideas. In fact, 99.9% of them are really bad ideas. But the ideas are a muscle. And if you don't use your muscles, like if you just stay in bed for 2 weeks, you'll need physical therapy to walk again. So muscles atrophy really fast. So I would say most people have atrophied idea muscles. So I exercise mine by writing 10 bad ideas a day. And every now and then, my idea muscle is exercised enough that when I need a good idea, I can usually come up with a good idea. But I've been doing this for almost 20, 24, 23 years now. And I realized after a few months of doing it, I was no longer depressed. I was starting to get actual opportunities based on my ideas. Like I would send ideas to other people and say, hey, why don't you do these ideas? And they would contact me back and say, hey, I'll give you money and you do these ideas. And so I started generating opportunities for myself. And that's what happens to this day. Hey, that's how I found, you know, that's how I started doing TAO Synergies, is I wrote to my friend who had this public company with $15 million cash in it. And I said, why don't you do these ideas? And he said, let's talk. And we spoke, and I hadn't spoken to him in years before that. And we decided together, let's do TAO Synergy. So every now and then, one of these ideas you write down in your notepad is going to flourish and turn into something worth millions of dollars to you.
Another interesting fact I found out about you on my research journey was you hosted a web series on HBO in the mid 90s.
Yeah,
What was that about? How did that happen?
that was the funnest. That's like the only time I had a regular job was for HBO, which was the television company. And HBO was kind of known for its edgy programming. And now everybody is edgy, but HBO was like the one network in the US that was really gritty and edgy and urban. And I built, so my title there, I was junior IT programmer. And I was the lowest person on the hierarchy, and nobody on the entertainment side cared about a programmer. But there was this new thing, the web. So I offered to do HBO's website, and they said no. We need the entertainment side involved. So I chose myself. I just made the website for them on a weekend. And then when they came into the office, I not only made their website, but I made an intranet for them. I hooked up everything in their Oracle databases and put a Netscape browser on every computer. And suddenly people could access the cafeteria menu, the human resources people database, the film database right on Netscape, which was the browser, or it was Mosaic then, Mark Andreessen's browser he made as a student. And then they said, okay, you can make, and I built a design for a website, and they said, okay, you can make the official website. And then I went up to the CEO of HBO. Again, I was lowest I like walked into his office and he looked at me and he's like, who are you? And I said, look, I'm building the website. Why doesn't HBO do a web show kind of gritty like your TV shows? And he said, I don't care. Do whatever you want. And so I went back to my boss and I said, look, Jeff Bewkes, the CEO, said I had to do this. And my boss was like, okay, I guess you got to do this. So I made a web show. I called it 3 a.m. And it was about what people were up to at 3 in the morning in New York City on a Tuesday night. Like there's no real reason to be out at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday night unless you were up to something no good. And I did that for almost 3 years, that website for them. I would do 20 interviews every Tuesday night at 3 in the morning outside. I'd, see people doing interesting things and I'd say, hey, what are you up to? And then I would get designers design around it. I would pick 4, do the transcriptions, take videos. The video wasn't popular on the web then, but I would try to do video. And then HBO asked me to shoot an actual TV pilot for it, which we did. Didn't work out as a series, but it was really a fun 3 years doing that project. And that project got so popular. I mean, Time Magazine featured it, that it got me people calling, hey, can you do my website like this? And I was an employee at HBO, but at night I would work on other AmericanExpress.com and other people's websites. So I was making $40,000 a year as a programmer at HBO. But then American Express was paying like $200,000 for a website. And it was like unbelievable. And so but it took me 18 months to jump. I was so scared. It took me 18 months to jump from my full-time job at HBO. I had 18 employees in 18 months that were working on my company, Reset. And finally I joined this full-time. And then a year later, I sold it.
Why do you think you had such the hesitancy to jump into full time?
Because kind of I wanted to do a TV show also. And I didn't care about money so much. I was torn between, building a business and making a lot of money and making a TV show. I wanted to turn 3 a.m. into a TV show. Then I had other ideas for TV shows. And I've been working on TV show ideas for forever. I feel like now is the first time I've kind of given up on the idea of doing a TV show. It never really worked. Fox Business offered me a TV show and I said no. That was the closest I got.
Why you didn't like Fox? You didn't want to be a part of the network?
At the time I was on CNBC 3 times a week talking about stocks. I was a little loyal to CNBC, which was a mistake. I should have maybe done Fox, but there's always regrets. People say, "Oh, I don't regret anything." I regret almost everything.
That is true. Not a lot of people are willing to admit they regret things. What would you
Because there's always things you could have done wrong. Like, for instance, I was excited about Bitcoin in 2013. I got some Bitcoin, but it was so easy to have gotten a lot more Bitcoin, and I just didn't do it. But now I have a lot of TAO, so we'll see.
it's a second chance, right?
Yeah, and look, I've built up a bunch of businesses. I've done okay, but nothing like if I had bought simply 1,000 Bitcoin for nothing back then when I was even excited about Bitcoin.
Yeah. Crazy to think about. What would you say is the most, if you had to pick a singular point in your career, what would you say is the most pivotal point for you or the most important point throughout your career?
I don't know. There's a lot of pivotal points because there's ups and downs, and there's extreme. I've gone broke not once, not twice, but at least 3 or 4 times after having millions, and then going to broke, and then millions. Like there's 3 skills to money. There's making it, keeping it, growing it. And for a long time, I was good at making it, but I was not good at keeping it and growing it. So I would say each pivotal point was A, when I learned how to make it, B, when I learned how to keep it, and C, when I learned how to grow it, knock on wood, because that's a skill that's ongoing. So those are all pivotal points. Like this concept of writing 10 ideas a day down, that was pivotal because maybe I would have killed myself otherwise. Like if I didn't start feeling enthusiastic about ideas again instead of being depressed and regretting losing all this money when I had 2 babies to feed and I was losing my house and everything. So, I mean, that was a long time ago, but that was a pivotal moment. And a pivotal moment was when, you know, I convinced my friends at what was then Synaptogenics to rename to TAO Synergies, forget about this Alzheimer's drug, and let's just go all in on TAO. Like that was a pivotal moment. So there's quite a few pivotal moments like that.
And I'm going to ask you one last question here today. As someone that's lived a very varied life, done a lot of different things, been in a lot of different careers, had a lot of different obsessions, what advice would you have for people when deciding where to spend their time? How should they spend their time? What should they be obsessed about?
Well, it's not what they should be obsessed about, but how to cultivate an obsession, how to find what you're obsessed about. So, and there's no direct answer. You just have to expose yourself to a lot of things. Like go to the bookstore, and is there any section where you would be willing to read every single book in that section? That might indicate you're obsessed with that area. And then you have to brainstorm, what can I do to further this obsession? Like I was talking to Dan Carlin. He has a very popular podcast called Hardcore History. So he was obsessed with history, but he wasn't. I think he was a college dropout. He wasn't like a historian. And his mom suggested him, "Why don't you just start a podcast about history? You're so into it." And he's like, I'm not a professional historian, but he chose himself. He started the most popular podcast about history. He really he only does one every like 2 or 3 months. He really researches every topic, and it's great. So sometimes you find an obsession, but then you have to figure out how to monetize or do something with that obsession also. But stand-up comedy, I never would have known I was obsessed with doing it if I didn't fight every fear in my body. I remember I was doing a podcast episode with Stephen Dubner, who wrote Freakonomics, and we decided we both were interested in stand-up comedy, but we were really afraid to do it. So we rented out a hall. We invited everybody who was listening to the podcast, which was turned out to be, whoever was available in New York City that night, like hundreds of people. And we did 5 minutes of stand-up each. and I became obsessed. Like I got to do this again. I got to do this a million more times. I really want to get good at this. So you just have to try things, and don't be afraid to experiment. So one like an example experiment is I needed to get better at comedy, but you can't if you're not good, you can't get on stage. How do you get on stage? If it's like a chicken or the egg thing. So I one time I did an experiment. I went on the subway in New York City at rush hour, and I videotaped myself doing stand up on the subway car, and I was super scared, but I did it. I did it like 50 times that day. I switched cars every stop, and that was just an experiment to see if I could do it and maybe learn something. So just don't be afraid to experiment with just particular experiments are cheap. The nature of an experiment means you're going to test something super cheap. Like I spent zero money and suddenly I was on 50 stages against a real hostile audience. They did not like me. And so I got a lot of experience very quickly doing an experiment and gaining knowledge. So don't be afraid to experiment occasionally. You know, I wanted to learn Kickstarter, and I was also curious about why this is 2017, 2018. Why did Trump want to buy Greenland? Like that was the craziest thing. He tweeted he wanted to buy Greenland. I never saw someone tweet they want to buy an entire country. So, and I wanted to experiment with writing. So all three things combined, I created a Kickstarter or a crowdfunding campaign to buy Greenland. So I had to do all the research about Greenland. I had to learn all the crowdfunding platforms like Indiegogo, Kickstarter, or whatever. It was it was interesting writing because you're writing in the Kickstarter format. Like, oh, here's why I want to buy Greenland. But also, if you donate $10, you could be a duke. If you donate $1,000, we'll name a holiday after you, and so on. So that was just an experiment. It could have gone huge, or it could just be, oh, I wasted a day, but I learned all about Greenland and Kickstarter and something new about writing. And it was the latter, but experiments will always gain you knowledge and help you point to what you're obsessed with. That was a long answer.
No, it's beautiful. James, I appreciate you coming on the podcast today. I'm sure they'll be around too in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.